This is Bobby Coggins. I'm here with Chris Cooper at Western Carolina University, and I'm going to let him tell us what's going on tonight and what department he's with.
Great. I'm Chris Cooper again. I'm the head of the Department of Political Science and Public Affairs here at WCU, and we're really excited to be hosting what we believe is the last 11th Congressional District debate of this election season. We're hoping that these folks can come, educate our students, educate our community about what they stand for and what they would do if they're elected to office. It's obviously a very competitive seat. It's a competitive district. Neither one is an incumbent. And so we're really looking forward to tonight.
Okay, and what's the department you're with here? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm with the Department of Political Science and Public Affairs. We've got an undergraduate political science major. We've got a political science minor. We've got an international studies major. We also have a highly acclaimed Master of Public Affairs program. We train folks to work directly in the public sector. So we educate around 100 of our undergraduate majors and around 60 graduate students, in addition to lots of other students who are just interested in politics and want to take our classes and learn more.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is Bobby Coggins. I'm here with Todd Collins at Western Carolina University. He's with the Public Policy Institute and they're having a debate tonight between Hayden Rogers and Mark Meadows. And I'm going to let him tell you about his department and a little bit about the debate that they're sponsoring and who the other sponsors are.
Yeah, well, thanks so much. We're with the Public Policy Institute. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan institute here on campus, supported by Western Carolina. And kind of our goal is we have several different goals, and one is outreach to the community. One is doing kind of applied research projects, so surveys, working with local governments. And so it's public policy broadly defined. So we may be doing environmental policy, we may be doing education policy. We're not really focused as much on kind of one type of policy. So what we're doing here tonight as part of our outreach, something that's really needed, is we're hosting the debate here for the 11th Congressional District candidates. We have about 450 to 500 people in the community, students here at Western Carolina, faculty and staff at Western Carolina that have already agreed, and we'll probably have more than that are coming in to listen to the candidates, to hopefully help make up their minds about who to vote for, and to raise awareness that it is time to vote, whether they like it or not. So we're hosting this debate. It's going to be a live streaming video on WLOS, so we'll have an even wider audience than the folks that are here on campus today. And we hope we have a great turnout, and we hope the candidates are excited about it, and I think they are.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Yep. Thank you.
So if we can get everybody to take their seats, we're about to get started. It's a good thing this microphone cord is so short. It's not going to come undone. First of all, let's give Western Carolina University a big round of applause for making this happen. For those of you folks who might not know who I am, my name is Russ Bowen. I work at WLOS. I anchor the 10 o'clock news. I've been there for about 12 years and followed politics ever since I've been here. There's nothing like Western North Carolina politics. How many of you are ready for a real good old-fashioned Western North Carolina debate? Yeah. This will be the last time these two get together, except for one exception in Mitchell County, in what's the newly drawn 11th district. Does everybody know what district you live in? You're not confused, right? You know you're not in the 10th anymore, right? Or are in the 11th and not the 10th. All right, I'm going to go over some rules for you so we can get this thing underway, just so you know how this thing is going to go down. Okay, so both candidates have participated in a coin toss. Hayden Rogers won. He got the option to go first, so he will take the first question. Mr. Meadows will take the second question. Mr. Meadows will take the first closing, and Mr. Rogers will take the second closing. All right, the questions will go 2 minutes per question. Each candidate gets to answer, 2 minutes. Then there's a rebuttal, 1 minute apiece. There's a light on the podium that you better pay close attention to. I don't want to have to start using the buzzer, but we will. Green means go. Yellow means you got 10 seconds left. Red means your time is up. For clarification purposes, the moderator may ask a short follow-up question. If there's a follow-up, you have 30 seconds to answer it. And you know I'll hold you to that 30. You should refer to the lighted timer to the end of all questions we'll have a 2-minute closing statement. So is everybody ready to get going? You ready? Let's welcome our candidates. Democrat Hayden Rogers and Republican Mark Meadows. Okay, Mr. Rogers, this first question goes to you. If the U.S. were to learn that Iran not only had the capability to produce a nuclear weapon, but had nuclear weapons at their disposal, would you favor immediate U.S. military intervention? 2 minutes.
All right, microphone check. It's a little short. You guys hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right. First of all, thank you all for coming. And Western Carolina, thank you for the opportunity for Mark and I to be here and to share our views with you and have a good, healthy discussion about a lot of the things that are very important to people of Western North Carolina in this country. Now, this is a good crowd. I'm excited to see all of you, but on Saturday, there's going to be an even bigger crowd. Those students here from Western who know there's a big battle Saturday, and it's over a jug. And I certainly wish the Catamounts all the success in the world when they play out. It's a great rivalry and a great mountain tradition here. Dr. Belcher, thank you so much to you and your wonderful university and the Political Science Department for putting this on. And I'm very, very honored to be here. Russ, what was that question again? I got it. That's a joke. I think
you can use your time any way you want.
Sure. In my opinion, it's absolutely unacceptable for us to allow Iran to develop the capability of a nuclear weapon. And I support all options in stopping that. I think the sanctions thus far have had an impact. I think that has slowed down. I think Israel has done a good job of also slowing that process down. And I think through a strong partnership with Israel and a continual our relationship in the intelligence community to make sure that we're on top of this and watching it very carefully. It is something that we must do. It is unacceptable for Iran to further destabilize an already unstable region and put one of our closest allies in the world in harm.
Mr. Meadows?
And the question, if you would repeat it, it was, would we actually have military action, not just what our policy on?
Would you essentially condone military action?
Well, thank you so much for coming out tonight. Thank you, Western Carolina University, for hosting this. Obviously, thank you, Russ, for moderating it. As we look at Iran, a nuclear Iran, is something that we can't accept as a nation. Not only because it's a threat to Israel, our closest ally in the Middle East, but it's a threat to the United States as well. As we see this, we've had the president of Iran make statements that what he wants to do is make sure that he wipes Israel and the United States off the face of the map. And as we see this, a nuclear Iran is the greatest national security threat we have. That was echoed just even today with a 4-star general that was talking about the fact that our greatest threat is not really terrorism. He said, if you want to stay awake at night, you need to think of a nuclear Iran. So do we need to draw a red line in the sand? Yes. Sanctions are great, and hopefully they work. I'm not optimistic that they will. Will we actually have to be the ones that put men and women in harm's way? I hope not. But we need to stand by our ally Israel and make sure that we're unwavering in that. And as we stand by them, I believe that they will actually be the ones that will take it out because they have the most at risk. And so they will be the ones that will put men in harm's way. But we need to stand behind them and know that they have an unflinching ally in the United States.
Mr. Rogers?
Sure. When I mention all options, I say that for a reason. That is not just because I'm uncomfortable talking about military action. That's because I've had the opportunity, as all of us here in America have, to witness what we do when we sometimes act prematurely, when we sometimes go forward without thinking about step 2 or 3. The military action is one component of what we need to focus on. Do we have the capability to take out their nuclear capabilities? The answer to that is yes. Second part of that, what next? What are the steps we take after we do that? And do we have the programs and the processes in place to ensure that we don't further destabilize the region, further commit troops or assets to a part of the world that has been in a quagmire since the beginning of time? So I think any action we take moving forward needs to be one that's well thought out. And we, again, it is unacceptable, intolerable for us to allow Iran to achieve the capability of creating a nuclear weapon.
Mr. Meadows?
Well, as we see this, one of the things that we've done is actually put sanctions in place. That's not to punish Iran, is to try to change their mentality on pursuing a nuclear weapon. Even the Obama administration recently, in sharing some of the data with Israel, acknowledges that they may have enough fissile material by March of next year for a bomb. You know, we can't stand to sit back and wait. And yet what we have to do is do our very best in negotiations and sanctions. We put an exemption on China. We've said we're going to have sanctions for Iran, but yet we still allow China to negotiate and provide things for them. That's not a full sanction. We need to take the exemptions out of there if we're going to put them and make sure that they are surrounded without any support. Indeed, we need to make sure that even China doesn't provide that support.
I have to follow up on this one a little bit. I'm hearing a lot about sanctions, but I'm not hearing a yes or no. Bottom line is, you're sworn in January. The next day you find out there are nuclear weapons in the hands of the Iranians. Do you support a military strike that day to take out those nuclear weapons?
Before we find out they have a nuclear weapon, and to be quite fair, I think Mark and I are actually saying the same thing there. It is unacceptable. The challenge is preventing that from happening. That should be our first and top priority. None of us want or eagerly anticipate the option of going with a military option.
And my foreign policy issue would be to support Israel in a first strike capability. You know, they would be the ones that would actually do that. They have the most to lose, but we need to also be able to assure them that we're going to be there for them, not only from a support standpoint, but from a military standpoint as well. So that would be my foreign policy initiative.
Okay, second question first goes to Mr. Meadows. Mr. Meadows, you have been fairly critical of earmarks, but one of the major jobs of a member of Congress is to bring money to this district. How do you plan to balance these competing ideas if you're elected to this congressional seat? Will you pursue federal infrastructure grants, and will you accept them?
Well, as we look at grants, obviously when we start looking at earmarks, one of the great things that we've done is that we put a ban on earmarks, and I'm for that, because what happens is, if not, we end up trading votes, and the people who get the earmarks are the most powerful senators and most powerful congressmen. And really, as a freshman, whether it's Hayden or myself, the chances of bringing an earmark back as a freshman to the district is not good. Now, as we look at this, are there grants out there that certainly provide good services, and would I support that? I think the answer to that is obviously yes, but when we start to grow it from a grant standpoint, we've got to make the decision. Do we go out and borrow money from China to provide that need? Because really right now, we are broke. We've got to figure out, is it something worth borrowing money from China to do? Is it something worth increasing the deficit to do? But more importantly, we need to start making good fiscal decisions in terms of cutting. Give you a prime example. In the last 3.5 years, we've had a 21% growth in the number of attorneys that the government has hired. Some 6,000 new attorneys that the government has hired. Now, when you look at that, a 21% increase, when most of us are going the other ways with our jobs, that is not good, sound policy. So we need to make some cuts in some of those areas. Am I for across-the-board cuts? No, I'm not. But it's because we didn't get there in across-the-board increases. But we need to look at that from a grant standpoint and see if it's beneficial not only to our region, but to the country as a whole.
Mr. Ross.
Having grown up here, Russ, Western North Carolina and our small rural communities are very dependent upon that federal aid to survive. whether that's in the form of grants or earmarks. The challenge is making sure that the expenditures and investments we make as a country are well targeted and beneficial, and that we get the maximum return on our investment for our communities. There is no question that earmarks got greatly out of hand. Congressmen were evaluated based upon the amount of ports or projects or dollars they could bring back. Now, that's 435 of them competing for that in a challenge. That is irresponsible. What is not irresponsible are grants coming into our fire departments for new equipment, for training. Grants coming into our community colleges, our universities, competitive grants that help our area. That's not irresponsible. And as for the question of earmarks, which has been banned in the House and the Senate, when you eliminate your representative's ability to influence and direct the funds that come into this district out of each specific agency, the people who make that decision are bureaucrats. They're unelected, they're anonymous, they're not accountable to you. When we, as representatives, are able to direct funding from there toward a specific area of need, we are accountable to you. It's transparent. You're aware of that. Earmarks don't always mean increased funding. It simply means taking a portion of a department's funding and directing it toward a specific project or need.
Mr. Meadows, 1 minute.
Well, I mean, as we look at it, obviously from earmarks, it's been part of the problem that we've had. It's gotten us into this mess. At the same time, do you support firemen? Do I support law enforcement, sheriffs? I've met with them all across this district, all 17 counties, numerous times, meeting with different law enforcement. And so do grants provide a need? Yes, they do. And are there some that should be kept? Without a doubt. But here's what we've done is we've gotten a lot of what we have in terms of legislation by giving special earmarks or favors to certain senators for their votes. You know, when you do that, what we're doing is we're selling out. And so by giving something for a particular district so you can get a vote to get a piece of legislation passed, I'm not for that. You know, do we need to negotiate and make sure that it's good on behalf of all Americans? We do. And certainly Western North Carolina has not gotten their fair share, but we need to make sure that they do.
Look, we pay federal taxes. Folks in Western North Carolina should not be excluded from the benefits of the tax dollars that are extracted from us. I'm at a little loss for words, because if you've followed this campaign and been involved in it as long as I have and Mark has, you've sort of seen a transformation. At the end of the primary runoff with Vance Patterson, there was a conversation where this question was specifically asked about earmarks and federal grants. Both Mr. Patterson and Mr. Meadows said they would not take it. Now the moderator, to make absolutely sure that Mr. Meadows and Mr. Patterson weren't mistaken about the question, said, "Are you meaning federal grants?" And Mr. Meadows and Mr. Patterson both said, "Yes, we would not take those because this is basically the problem." It is more problematic to me that our tax dollars are sent somewhere else and don't benefit the people who are paying them. And frankly, this is a position that is a modified and a new position, Mr. Meadows.
Question 3, we'll start with you, Mr. Rogers. Mr. Meadows has been fairly clear on his opinion of President Obama's policies over the past 4 years. He is against them. Now, some voters are confused by your stance a bit, Mr. Rogers. Has Mr. Obama's first term as president fulfilled your expectations? Do you support and endorse President Obama?
I'm running for a seat to represent Western North Carolina and the people of 17 counties. I will stand up for the things I believe in and the values that I learned growing up right here, whether that's President Obama, whether that's President Romney, or whether that's President Bush. I deliberately chose, not to endorse or participate in the federal election. To my own demise. I received much criticism from that during the primary, or after the primary, excuse me, this was in early July, from fellow Democrats who were disappointed. The reason I made that decision was not based off of a political thing. I am focused on running for United States Congress to represent the people of the 11th Congressional District. That's my only priority. I'm not getting involved in a governor's race, a presidential race, or a county commissioner race. I represent people who vote for President Obama or President Romney or many other candidates running for various offices. I think my obligation is to you, and that is my sole focus.
Mr. Meadows.
Well, I'm not sure that there was an answer in there, but as we look at that, I mean, as we start to see this, have I been critical of President Obama? Yes. Do I believe that there are a lot of failed policies? I think the answer to that is yes. Most of the people in this district, in this conservative district, do not see that President Obama represents the mountain values that we hold dear. I mean, they don't represent those kind of values. And so we've got Hayden here saying, well, he hasn't endorsed. I think it's time that we get a clear answer. I mean, is he going to vote for President Obama because he supports his legislation, or he's not? I mean, we've got to get to that point because people do expect an answer. I've come out and said that I've endorsed not only Mitt Romney, but I've been willing to campaign for him. I've been willing to look at what he supports and believe in what he can do for this nation. Why? Because there's a plan. President Obama does not have a plan. Governor Romney does have one, and it's one that gets people back to work. And when we start to see that there's an actual plan that gets people back to work, that's what I'm supporting. We've got 17 counties with the unemployment here that in this state that is at 9.7%. And we've got many college students here. Half of them will come out after graduating and not be able to find a job that they've been trained to take. We can do better than that as Americans, and we need to do better than that as Americans. And so, am I supportive of Mitt Romney? Yes, I am. Do I believe that where Hayden really is? Either he's going to vote for him or he's not. And I'd love to hear an answer.
This is exactly what's wrong with politics. Oh, it really is. You laugh, and that's okay. This team mentality, this that you can't be your own person, that you have to subscribe to a political ideology, that you have to saddle, up to one particular horse or another. Have you guys not had enough of watching this? I mean, are we not tired of this? Can Mark and I not run against each other as two candidates, presenting ideas and having a healthy discussion about what we can do for the people of Western North Carolina? Now, I did not go to my party's convention, which was in Charlotte, and I chose not to endorse in the presidential race. I haven't been, when any of the high-profile Democrats have come to Western North Carolina, I haven't been there. Because I've been at places like B-Log School. I've been at Hiawassee Dam. I've been all over the district. Mark, on the other hand, has taken a completely different approach. He went home to Tampa for the RNC convention. He was happy to go down there and hobnob with the celebrities of his party. He chose to skip a debate in Cherokee County. Little Murphy, I understand, it's not many people, but he chose to skip that debate in order to go have his picture made and get autographs with Romney and Ashford. That's not who I am, and that's not why I'm running for Congress.
Mr. Meadows, you'll get an extra 20 seconds.
Well, as we look at this, obviously, he's still avoiding the question. And what we've got to do is we've got to have an answer to that. I mean, how do you know where he stands if he's not willing to give an answer? The other part of that is when we talk about skipping a debate in Cherokee County. That's not factual, because we had never committed to go to that debate. We've got emails that will support it, never have. But when we talk about missing debates, Mr. Rogers has missed 4 debates that we've had before. I can name them. There's 2 in Buncombe County, 1 in Burke County, another one over in Buncombe County. And so as we start to, and even today, the Matt Matan show, you haven't been willing to go on, stopping a 16-year tradition of having debates among congressional candidates because you couldn't find the time to do it. So, to say that we've skipped out on something, I think it's the pot calling the kettle black.
This 4th question comes from a Western student. This question was submitted by Jeremiah Mosteller, a political science major at WCU. Do you think that the federal government has a role in education? If so, what is the extent of that role, and why do you believe they should fill this role? Mr. Meadows?
Well, I've been very vocal. Here, my belief in education is that it's best handled at a local level by local teachers, local student superintendents, and local school boards. You know, the more that we put an emphasis at a federal level, the less likely it is to get the results. Now, is there a role? Certainly there is. Have we seen a federal role that has supported higher education, that has supported K through 12? We have. But as we see that, time and time again, the governors across this country will tell you that the states are the best place to implement policy and the financial obligations as it relates to education. And so I'm not for federal curriculums that are passed down from the federal government. We've got a $69 billion budget for the Department of Education, and yet I've never had anybody from the federal government call and ask how my kids were doing in school, you know, or how they're doing, you know, it just doesn't happen. And so as we see this, does it have a role? Certainly. Is it a limited role? Yes. Am I for No Child Left Behind? I'm not. That was passed under a Republican administration. It did not achieve the purposes that it was intended to achieve. And as we've gone around and talked to superintendents and teachers, they've said it was a bad idea. So, you know, that's not something that I would support. But again, it shows that when we get the decision making away from the local level, we've got an issue there. And so I don't support it.
Mr. Rogers?
I'm a product of Robbinsville High School, Robbinsville Elementary School, public schools here in this district. My children are in 2nd and 3rd grade at Murphy Elementary School. My wife is president of Tri-County Community College. I believe with all my heart that public education is the foundation of this country and is the key to our continued success moving forward in a global economy. Now, our competitors, the Chinas, the Germanys, the Indians, all these other countries are investing in their people. They are investing in their education, they're investing in their job training, and they're doing that at a federal level. I was very fortunate in that I was able to attend Princeton University at Robbinsville High School. And I went on student aid, that's financial aid, student loans, worked in the cafeteria, and my parents borrowed money. Now, I would not have had that opportunity had it not been for the Department of Education, which Mark wants to eliminate. And that's fine, that's a philosophical difference. But let me tell you what else that does. 73% of the students at this university are dependent upon either grants, financial aid, student loans, or some sort of scholarship. That's 3 out of 4. I don't think Jackson County can help with that. I don't think they have the tax base or our small counties to ensure that opportunity to get an education is there. I believe firmly in that. Now, like my opponent, I think No Child Left Behind missed the mark. I think the goal there was to set some sort of minimum standards and accountability process. It hasn't worked. It is an ineffective way that limits our teachers' ability to teach our students, not enhances it. And it's not an accurate measure of the students' progress. I would like to see more flexibility in that. I would like to see more flexibility with our teachers at the local level, at the state level. You have to have minimum standards. We compete globally, guys. Jobs don't stop at the state lines. We compete all over the world, in every state. You have to have some minimum standards to ensure that all kids are getting an education, regardless of which state they're from.
Mr. Meadows, you get 20, well, actually this is rebuttal, so I'll give you a minute 20.
To make it clear, I was not for eliminating federal loans so students can't. I've never said that. I've been on the campaign for over a year and 3 months, and never have I said that. You know, Hayden and them have been following me. They've been taping me all over the place, so they would know if I had said that, and obviously that's not part of our record. But the other problematic thing that we just mentioned here is that we heard from Hayden that China and India and all of them are investing at a federal level. I don't think that they are the hallmark of what we need to be following in terms of our education system. I mean, what we're seeing was a public school teacher. And as a public school teacher, I know that there were a number of times where we had to actually pay for construction paper because there was not enough funds there to be able to do that. I also know that teachers on a regular basis are having to go out and get part-time jobs in the summer just to make ends meet. That's not the best that America can do. We need to do better, and so certainly do we have a role? Yes. Can the state help fulfill that and administer it? I believe that they can, but local superintendents and school boards and teachers make the best decisions.
Isn't this fun? Maybe China is not the role model we look for, Mark, but let me tell you this. They rank first in math and first in reading in the world, and they have surpassed us. We have fallen about 14th and 17th in those two respective categories. Now, there are two ways we can look at this. We can be objective. We can look at facts and evidence and make decisions that we believe best suit our country and the needs of our people. Or we can clutch to an ideology of how we think things ought to be, and we can cherry pick the parts of that we like that fits that line of thinking. I'm not that guy. I never will be that guy. And I believe, and I think most of you believe, whether you like me or not, or going to vote for me or not, you believe that we need an educated population. It is in the best interest of our country. It's the best interest of our families. And access to that is the critical barrier. If we don't have access to it, and only the select few who may choose private school, or who may choose homeschool, or whatever, if we limit it to them, we're worse off, not better.
I have a follow-up question. Well, you'll get a chance during the follow-up question. You can use the 30 seconds as you wish. And Mr. Meadows, I have to ask this question. Okay, you want to leave it up to the state of North Carolina and to the local school systems. The state of North Carolina has an abysmal graduation rate and testing scores. Can you really trust this state to get the job done?
Well, the answer to that is yes. I mean, if you can't trust your elected officials, now the Democrats have been in control of the state house for
that has nothing to do with the Department of Education.
It does have everything to do with the Department of Education on a state level, and so as we see that, but let's get back to the statistic, because statistics can lie too. You know, we talk about China being number one. Well, not everybody in China gets the opportunity to go to school. They pick the very best. They test the very best. And yet what we do is we take our special needs students, we put them in the same pot, we test them all. And so it's not fair to compare one particular testing to another where we've selected winners and losers in China and not here in America.
Mark is exactly right. And under his plan, we would be more like China. And that we will select the very best and the fortunate we can go to school, and we will cherry pick. Here's the thing. Eliminate the Department of Education. How many of you know what it does?
That's my point.
All right. No one intended to let me educate you. That's the funding for special needs funding. That's where it comes from. That's where student loans come from. That's where financial aid comes from. That's where Title I funding comes from. It comes from the Department of Education. It's not just about giving control back to a state to govern the curriculum. It's about how do you pay for that. Small communities can't afford that. You have to have the pooled resources and the economy of scale to do this so that access and opportunity is for everyone.
Do you want to keep this going? Mr. Rogers, this is for you. Neither one of you have ever held an elected office up to this point, but yet you're running for the U.S. Congress. Why should the voters of this district not be more concerned about your lack of experience as an elected public servant?
Sure. It is true neither of us have held public office. I have had the distinct pleasure of representing the people of the current 11th district for over 5 years in a staff capacity. I was Congressman Schumer's chief of staff. I am familiar and have some basis of understanding of policy and of the legislative process. I've been able to see firsthand some of the things that work and are effective and many of the things that don't. The biggest challenge we face as a country is not a shortage of ideas. It's not a shortage of intellectual ability to analyze problems. It's a complete lack of willingness to work in a bipartisan manner to solve problems. And it is. Standard & Poor's downgraded our credit rating to a AA+ for the first time in American history because we had a group of people in Congress, led by Eric Cantor, who were willing to flirt with and play chicken with increasing the debt ceiling vote, and we got downgraded because of it. Guys, we got to get past it. We do. And whether it's Mark's idea or my idea, that is not what you should base your approval on. Is, can it help America? Can it help Western North Carolina? And can we implement it? I think my experience as a native Western North Carolinian, I didn't have to travel around the district. I don't need a GPS to understand where I'm going or who I'm talking to. I think you combine that with the policy and legislative experience that I have, and I'm the only candidate out of the original 11 that ran who can go to work for people of Western North Carolina on day one.
Mr. Meadows. Albert Einstein says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And what we've got to do is we've got to look at how we fix Congress. It is obvious to everybody in this room, even to Hayden, because he's admitted it before, that there's something wrong with Congress and the way that they do business. Now, from my standpoint is do I have all the insider connections that Hayden has up in Washington, D.C.? No, I don't. I'm a business guy that grew up poor, that quite frankly knows how to make a payroll, who has done that, who over and over again understands that regulation is not our friend. It is not our ally. What it does is puts a stranglehold on businesses. It stops us from hiring students that would be here because we can't continue to expand our workforce. I understand how regulation does that. But I also understand how the other things that we continue to pass over and over in Congress continues to hamper us. You know, $4 a gallon fuel. We've got to come up with an energy policy. We came up with the Department of Energy over 35 years ago. The government says this is what we're going to do is come up with a good plan. Well, we've yet 35 years later to come up with a good plan to get us off our dependency on foreign oil. It becomes time that we have to make serious decisions, business decisions, and hopefully a business approach will make a big difference. The last thing I would like to say is that when you come up in terms of electing someone to represent you, it's not about being a congressman. It's about being a representative. And when you represent the will of the people, it makes a big difference. You know, we talk about you don't have to have a GPS to get all of them. We have learned more places in this particular 17 counties than you would ever imagine. Places that you haven't been to, I know. And so as we look at that, what happens is that we've got to make sure that we hear everybody's wish and represent all 750,000 people in the 11th Congressional District.
The question was about, should y'all be worried about two people who've never held public office? It's about public service. Now, sure, it's about ideas, it's about experience, all those things you should weigh. But it's about the obligation to serve the district that you represent. Now, Mark and I have had this discussion before. Apparently, I haven't missed too many debates because that's the second time I've heard the Einstein quote stand beside it. But he also brought up this whole concept of it's broken, you know, Congress isn't working. He's right. But what he's not right about is why. Democrats and Republicans independently are not to blame on the problem. The problem is politics has transformed into this thing that never ends. The governing never stops and the politicking, the governing never starts because the politicking never ends. And I've seen that firsthand. It led me to run. I believe that. I believe we need people who will work together. We cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Mr. Meadows, you get a minute 24.
As we start to look at this, our founding fathers never intended for there to be career politicians. They had business people, surveyors, they had merchants. They had, yes, a few attorneys, but we've got more attorneys up there than we can shake a stick at this particular point. And what happens is our founding fathers had business people that would go up there, they would conduct the business that needed to be conducted, and then they would come back to the district because that was the people that they were accountable to. That's what we need to get back to. That's what I'm committed to do, is to represent the people of this 11th Congressional District all the way from Lenore to Murphy. And as we do that, what will happen is it will make a big difference because people will once again have a voice.
This next question goes to Mr. Meadows. One of the most replayed moments from last week's presidential debate surrounded equal pay for women. Do you think it's the federal government's role to help close the pay gap between men and women?
Well, obviously, I'm for equal pay for equal work for women, and as we look at that, business people make business decisions. And quite frankly, if they could hire all women for a fraction of the cost of men, there wouldn't be any men. The unemployment among men would be much greater than women because business people, they're going to go and try to find the lowest cost provider of whatever service that we have. And some people say, well, gosh, that's not true. But look what we have with undocumented workers. The reason why we have that is because people start to go out to look for who they can hire and get it at the cheapest rate. Now, do we have to be fair about that? Certainly we do. And am I for equal pay? I am for equal pay. Obviously, as we see this, having men and women, any difference in terms of what they get paid for the quality of work would be wrong.
But if I could follow up on that, should it be up to the federal government to make sure that happens, or the individual businesses to choose to do that?
Well, it's up to the federal government to set guidelines against discrimination, of which we already have. And those guidelines against discrimination where we can't discriminate based on race, color, creed, gender, as we see that, there are already those guidelines there. So if we start to see discrimination there are laws on the book, and certainly having that as a federal standard is appropriate.
I believe in equal pay for all. I'm supportive of the Lilly Ledbetter Act, and I think it's an effective way to ensure equality. Second part of that, which I'm going to expand and use the rest of my time as I would like, is we need to ensure that we have job opportunities for men and women. And we need to make sure that we have those job opportunities everywhere. I want to focus on the issues that are going to help Western North Carolina. Now, in order for me to do that, I have to know what they are. I have to understand how they impact our people. And that's one of the huge advantages that I have in growing up here. Like many of you, not all of you, but many of you have. I've lived that. I've seen that. I grew up in Mountain Grove, which is in Robbinsville. I didn't know why almost half the people I went to school with got an extra box of chocolate milk for free. They paid for it. I didn't know why. But I do now. That's about equality. That's about helping folks who need help so that they can later help themselves. And they can enter the workplace as a female or as a male. And they can earn a living that can support their family.
I don't know what follow-up there is to that. If we want to talk about jobs, we're the only candidate.
We're not on jobs. We're on equal pay for women.
Well,
And the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Do you support it?
Well, as we look at that, what that basically does is change the statute of limitations in terms of lawsuits. And so what it does is it prolongs the time where somebody can come back and say, I was discriminated on way back then. Now, I'm not for that. No.
I said yes.
Mr. Rogers, we'll start with you on this question. Both of you have been very clear about your support for the middle class. You support middle class tax cuts. You want to make life better for the middle class. A large portion of the people in this district, however, live below the poverty line. What specific policies do you propose to help those living in poverty?
One of the most important ones we've discussed at length up here, and that's access to education. It is key in breaking that cycle of poverty. It's factual. The other things that we need to invest in, early childhood nutrition, making sure that poor working families or poor aspiring working families have an opportunity to have access for child care so that they can go out and enter the workforce. These are real challenges. Y'all all see it. You see it in your neighborhoods. We know these. We know them personally. These type of investments are critical. But now what we must ensure that we do, and we've not done a great job of this to be candid, is making sure that the investments we are making in these people and in their families are truly investments and not just expenditures. That we don't have a system that basically just provides a basic level of support to sustain someone without the encouragement or the opportunity to help that person get off of that system. These safety nets are critical. You have to have seen the success of just one person who started in a situation like that and was able to make it. When you see that, you understand that it can be done. Now, the frustrating part for this, as we focus on these things, and as we try to implement programs, and we try to put in safeguards and protections to stop the abuse or fraud, the frustrating thing is that's difficult to do. But it's something that we should always aspire to do. So I think we invest in them: job training, education, child nutrition, child care, and health care.
Mr. Meadows?
Well, I've lived the American dream. I grew up poor. And so when we see this, I know that there's better days ahead for many of us. But here's the thing that we've got to do, and one of the reasons why I don't support some of the Obama policies. What we've got are more people on food stamps than ever before, 47 million people on food stamps. But we've got more people looking for work, some 23 million people looking for work, some 12,500,000 out of work completely. And as we see this, the best way to get out of poverty is create job opportunities where people can go to work, that want to work, that will do that. I think we go the other way when we take away the work requirement for welfare. What we've done is, in doing that under this administration, we've taken away all incentive for the safety net that we're talking about. Now, am I for safety nets? Yes. Do we need a helping hand up? Yes, we do. But at the same time, when we have started on a policy to make people dependent on the government, the only thing that it does is it promotes more dependency on the government. We've got to create jobs, and we've got to make sure that we create an opportunity where people can better themselves. I'm living proof that it's possible.
I think this is another instance of the evolution of camping. It wasn't that long ago in a primary where Mr. Meadows said that one of his priorities was to cut spending for the poor and unemployed. Now, I like this position better. I want to cut spending too, but you don't look at this thing as dollars. You look at this as what works, what doesn't. Eliminate what doesn't. Sometimes you have to expand what does, if it's actually demonstrating that it's effective. And Western North Carolina is an area where we need help. And we're strong, we're independent thinking, and we work hard. But we face some challenges. Be cognizant of that and understand that.
Do we need to cut spending? Yes. I can't even imagine that my friend here to my left would even believe that 47 million people on food stamps is the best that we can do. It's not the best that America can do. We were doing better than that only a few short years ago, and what we've got to do is get people back to work and do that. In terms of an evolution of a candidate, I'm not sure exactly what he's talking about there, but here's what I believe. When we start to allow jobs to be created, And when I mean real jobs that are created, not ones that we make up, when they're created, then people, their self-esteem goes up. All of a sudden, they're willing to work harder, and they're willing to do what? Provide for their children and their families. That's the reason why we make sacrifices as parents. That's why we go to work many times, and we've got to create that same opportunity.
I have a quick follow-up on that particular question. Are there any specific programs for the poor that you would eliminate that you either of you see just are not working at all?
Again, this came up in our last radio debate, which we had just a few days ago. I think there's a great opportunity to further improve welfare. I think that if you could put a requirement with welfare that had the participants actually participate at a volunteer unpaid level, maybe 8 hours a week. That's assuming you're not a single mother or something where you have to take care of the kid at home. So that you can get acclimated to a work environment, so that you can participate in this process and the socialization and those things that go along with that. Not only would that be a great benefit, I think, for our communities, whether that's nonprofits that they work for or county or city governments, but you get that sense of pride and of work and being involved and learn some things that might lead to opportunities.
Mr. Meadows, you get 50 seconds.
Well, I mentioned one of them. I think we need to put the work requirement back in welfare recipients, make sure that there's a work requirement. I also believe that we shouldn't be giving welfare to those that are on drugs. So I'd be for drug testing for welfare recipients. If we're using those the intent is to provide a safety net. It's not to provide a way of living. And so those two things would be changes that I would make.
Clarify your positions on the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, more commonly known as Obamacare. Which specific provisions would you keep? Which would you get rid of? And Mr. Meadows, this goes to you.
Now, I'm for the repeal, and that's where Hayden and I are different. I'm for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. It was passed under a Democratic control without any Republican input. We talk about gridlock all the time. Well, there was no gridlock because the Democrats, when they had total control, you know, in this district, almost 70% of the people were against it, and yet we put it in place. That's not a representative form of government. So to answer your question specifically, what would I do? I would be for a full repeal of the Affordable Care Act. I don't believe that we should have an independent board of 15 people making health care decisions, replacing our doctor in doing that. Because when we do that, we have appointed bureaucrats that make life and death decisions. And so I would be for getting rid of that. As we look at a replacement, what are two aspects that we have to look at? Obviously, the health care provision for people that are 26 years of age up to 26, we can do that with the private sector right now with private insurance, and I could see us working to that end. The other thing that we would look at is pre-existing conditions. We've got to find a way to make sure that we can provide for those pre-existing conditions. You know, anybody who loses their health care, Debbie and I have had pre-existing conditions that we've had to deal with before. And so we've got to find a way, I believe that we can with competition in the private sector and allowing health insurance to follow an employee perhaps would be one of those ways. But those two areas would be areas that we need to address. But having patient-centered reform. Here's the thing is, if I've got skin in the game, and I'm willing to help make those things, and perhaps I make a decision not to have a particular procedure because I get a better copay or less of a deductible, then I've got an incentive to make wise choices. All of us go to the doctor and we never ask what it's going to cost. We give them our health care card, we say go ahead and do it, bill it out, and we don't ever consider, we ask the price of bananas, but we won't for health care. We've got to change that.
I was working for Congressman Schumer through the whole health care debate. We voted against it twice. Not because we didn't think health care was a problem, not because we didn't think it needed to be addressed, because we didn't think the bill did enough to curb costs. Now the reason that I don't support repeal is that, like it or not, like the political value or not, there were some good components of the Affordable Care Act. My opponent mentioned a couple of those. softly mentioned them as we would look at that in the future, not as a specific recommendation. But what he also failed to mention was, we reduced the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. The donut hole, many of you may be familiar with it. Part of that was closed. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. If you had cancer, now because of the Affordable Care Act, you were able to go get insurance. Now here's where our approach differs. By repeal, as opposed to taking out individual mandate, as opposed to taking out the efficiency panel that he refers to, all of these things are options for him to be a congressman. He can go and work and build a coalition to eliminate all of those things. And he has the ability to keep the pre-existing condition, the kids under 26, seniors closing the donut hole on prescription drugs. But he chooses not to for the political value of undoing the Affordable Care Act. Now here's what the difference is. Under my plan, my proposal, it's not a plan, is people who are able to buy insurance now because of this, why kick them off? Why not go up there day one and eliminate everything else if you want to? And while you work on health care, those people aren't negatively impacted. Now what the specifics we should do are these. Control costs. The first thing you do is you grant most favored nation status to ourselves. We pay more per drug, more per procedure than any country in the world does.
Time.
Most of them made here. You can give him more time. I'm on a roll, Russ.
You can finish it in your rebuttal if you want.
All right.
Okay, Mr. Meadows, 30 seconds.
1 minute.
1 minute, yeah.
You know, here's the thing that Hayden talks about. So he was against it, and now he's for it because it's passed. I don't understand that. The reason why you didn't vote for it is because they didn't need your vote. And so, I mean, what we've got here is there's already been a number of repeal votes that have been up to repeal the independent payment advisory board, and yet it was voted against. To get rid of a slush fund, $200 million slush fund, that was voted against. You know, there's been well over 26 different votes to repeal aspects of the Affordable Care Act, and all of them have been voted down by the Democrats. So we're not talking about tweaking a system here. What we're doing is we're getting a federal take of our healthcare system. We're replacing the doctor-patient relationship with a government-patient relationship, and that doesn't provide good health care, and it certainly doesn't cut costs.
That's right.
There have been 30 votes roughly, or 27, 36 votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act, either in whole or in part. I point you back to the Albert Einstein quote that he referenced earlier. You have a Democratic president, Democratic senator, and a Republican-controlled House of Representatives, which chose to make a political statement. Not effective in health and health care. We are just beginning to try to solve the problem that consumes 17.4% of our GDP. That's the most in the world. Second most is Switzerland. Now, Switzerland has a system like us. It's not a socialized system. They have a Medicare and a Medicaid program. They have private insurance. They have self-pay and good health care. Theirs consumes 5% less of their GDP. They're at 12.4% than we do. There's nobody getting between you and your doctor. It's a combination of a market-based solution with the safety nets. If we were able to reduce costs just to get to that level, which is the second highest in the world, that saves us $1 trillion per year. The current deficit that we face in Congress, just by taking that 5%.
Let's get real here for a second about this. You're going to have one party win the House, the Senate, and the White House to repeal Obamacare. So my question is, if
That's what we're working on.
If that doesn't, let's be realistic. Okay. If this doesn't happen, can both of you work with the other side to make Obamacare better?
Obviously, we have to face that if it's not one party or the other. And so as we see that, that's been a realistic thing that we've looked at. Here's my concern. Can I find common ground? The answer to that is yes. I'm a business guy. I've done it for 28 years up here in the mountains. And as we see that, I'm already.
Just keep going. I'll give you a minute. Go.
Okay. I take people who want to sell their house for as much as they possibly can, and people who want to buy it for as little as they possibly can, and I bring them together to find common ground where they're happy, where they actually have something, and if I don't get paid. I've been doing that for 28 years, and so I can figure out how to find common ground. Do we need to do that? Yes. Are there some things I've mentioned? Coverage for 26 years, pre-existing conditions. Can we do that? I am against an independent payment board of 15 unelected people who are not accountable even to Congress, because if the Congress can't agree, the Health and Human Services makes the decision. That's one person. That's too much power in the hands of one person.
Mr. Rogers.
Even for those of you who are so passionately clapping, it is absurd to think that there's one bipartisan bone in Mr. Meadows' body. This is one of the most spirited conversations he and I have had. I hope you're enjoying it, because I think we are. But the facts are, the ultimate goal is to fix health care. If you let your political motive to drive you in getting there, you're going to miss the mark. We have to control costs. We pay more, as I talked about, in procedures. And I want to get back to this. Pick one of these things and work on it if you believe in it. If you think that Medicare ought to be able to negotiate prescription drug prices, which they should, work on that. If you don't like that 15-person board, Mark, work on that. And all the while you do this, eliminate that portion. Work with people to replace it, exchange it, eliminate everything. But if there's 3 or 4 good things, you don't have to throw them out.
Time. So in the spirit of spirited, we are here today on the campus of Western Carolina University, where they have adopted a campus-wide theme of citizenship and civility. How has your conduct thus far in this campaign contributed to this goal, and what does your conduct in this campaign suggest about the way you would conduct yourself in Congress?
Who's first, me?
It's Mr. Rogers' turn, right?
My green light's on.
So did mine.
It's Mr. Rogers' turn.
Look, I think both of us have run an honorable campaign. I don't think either of us has attacked really unfairly, and I think you agree with that. I think we've had a healthy discussion, spirited, fun at times.
Very little times. No.
When I decided to take on this endeavor, I did it because I believe in the people of Western North Carolina, and I did it because I thought I had something to offer, to contribute towards solving some of the solutions. That's the type of person I am. That's the type of person I've always been. And that's the type of representative I want to be, should I get the opportunity to do that. Campaigns are tough. We've seen, and they get worse every year. The one thing that this audience could probably agree on is you probably had enough negative ads on television between the presidential races. I don't care who you're for. You get tired of these things. We become desensitized to them. But the truth is, it really prevents us from talking about the issues that matter to everybody and the true points. So I've tried to focus on that. I've tried to focus on the things that I believe are important to the folks of Western North Carolina, and frankly, the things that are important to all Americans. And I'd like to see more people do that.
Well, as we look at this campaign, I think one of the things that you can look at, I know in our television advertising, we've not mentioned Hayden's name once. We haven't come after him. What we've done is tried to run an honorable campaign that talks about our plan and our vision for America. We've come with a plan to create jobs, a plan to reduce regulation, a plan to really eliminate the need for us to go on those safety net programs that we've all been talking about, a plan for us to be energy independent. That's been our message, and we felt like taking a clear message to the people in a positive way would be rewarded. Now, the consultants will all they'll tell him and they'll tell me that nobody loves negative ads, but they work. And the fact of the matter is we've tried to be honorable in the way that we've done that in a spirit of civility, as you were saying. But the other thing is that this is not a Democrat and Republican nation. This is a nation of American people. And it's time that we start acting like Americans. Because there's crosses on hillsides in Europe, and none of them say Republican or Democrat. What they do is they show that men and women have fought and died for the freedoms that we hold dear. And we see that over and over again. And so when 10 generations ago, when my grandfather got off the Mayflower, he wasn't a Democrat or Republican. He was here for religious liberties. And when he landed there at Plymouth, what he wanted was a better life for America. And that's what we need to do. As a Democrat and as a Republican, we need to make sure that we represent the people, and I'm committed to doing that.
Asheville, the largest city and the economic center of Western North Carolina, is no longer in the 11th Congressional District. How does this change affect your ability to convince Congress to approve federal funding for a much more rural district? Mr. Meadows?
Well, we've already been working with a number of members of Congress to try to make sure that they understand Western North Carolina, not with the assumption that we're going to be a member of Congress, but trying to be prepared and ready. It's been really the first time that we've seen people in leadership in my party all over Western North Carolina. We've had congressmen in Clay County, we've had them in Haywood County, we've had them in Buncombe County, we've had them in Henderson County, we've had them in McDowell County, and we've had them in Caldwell and Burke County, all over this district. And the reason why we've done that is so that when we look at this, we can say, these are the needs of Western North Carolina. You've been there, you've been on the ground, and what we have is we have hurting people, and we need to make sure that we do that. Now, in doing that, is that enough alone? No, you've got to build coalitions, and you've got to make sure that we've done that. We've reached out. Obviously, I've been in conversations with Congressman Patrick McHenry, who will be representing downtown Asheville if the voters so choose here in November. But I've also talked to other congressmen in South Carolina and Tennessee that borders it. They have some of the same rural concerns that we have, to build a coalition to say, how can we help Western North Carolina, the specific needs that we have here, and they, without any reservation, are willing not only to travel here, but to meet and greet the people on a regular basis. And we've done that, trying to be prepared to meet the rural needs that we have. You know, I live in Jackson County. I'm as close to home as I normally am on any given night. You know, I'm 20 minutes away from my house. But as we see that, one of the things is Jackson County is no different than Macon County in terms of the needs. In Clay County, Cherokee County, as we look at it, each one of them has specific needs that are unique to that county, but we know that rural needs are important just as much as some in the urban areas.
Mr. Rocky.
I'm actually not being sarcastic this time. Run that question by me one more time.
No, that's cool. No problem. Asheville, the largest city and the economic center of Western North Carolina, is no longer in the 11th Congressional District. So how does this change affect your ability to convince Congress to approve federal funding for a much more rural district?
Regardless of which congressional district it is, Asheville's the largest city in the far west, and in some ways it is an economic hub. Many counties benefit, especially the surrounding counties, from their interactions there. The challenges that face our rural counties are no different than they were prior to Asheville being moved. We still have infrastructure needs, we still have education needs, and we have to address those. Again, I didn't have to drive around to figure this out. Not only, and I applaud Mr. Meadows for bringing in congressmen to the district. I think that's a good thing to do for these guys to take it out of their busy schedules, come down here and learn more about Western North Carolina. There, I was being sarcastic. But the fact is, if you want a congressman who understands Western North Carolina, then vote for one that's from here. Both the one that grew up. Look for a guy in Robbinsville. About as rural as it gets. Now, you know, and I don't mean this mean-spirited, but it was a funny story. There's an older gentleman who lives here in Jackson County. I'm part of this community, my community at home. I'm active in it. I'm in the drugstores. I'm doing things. You know.
Time. You can have it in the rebuttal.
You would have enjoyed that one, Russ.
You can have it in the rebuttal if you wish. Mr. Meadows.
Well, I mean, as we look at it, we talk about, you know, he says, well, gosh, you're not from here. I've been here 28 years. And no, if we want to have this whole election come down on whether I was born here or not, I think that that's a pretty sad commentary on looking at who needs to be your next congressman. You know, the next thing I know, he's going to be telling me that I'm some Frenchie, because I was actually born on a military base. My dad was in the Army in Verdun, France. And so, you know, when we start to look at this, if the debate gets down to the fact that I'm not from here and he is, then obviously he wins. But really, the debate ought to be about who has the best plan to create jobs and get Western North Carolina going again. I'm the only one that's put forth a plan. I mean, they've been very critical of my plan, but we've yet to see a plan from Hayden Rogers in terms of what he plans to do. We've got a 4-point plan that will put 10 million people back to work, and it's time that we do that.
Back to my story. I'm not being critical of Mr. Meadows for moving to Western North Carolina. If I wasn't from here, I'd be making arrangements to get here myself. It's a great place to live. Good people, hard-working people, great communities. Those of you that are involved in them, you know that. What I am being critical of, in all due fairness, Mark, is when people come here, we welcome them. We welcome them into our communities. Now, most of them choose to participate in that. And back to that old man who told me this. He said, you know, I've grown up here my whole life. Now, this is a man on Social Security, Jackson County. He just lived 20 minutes from here. He said, not even as much as a car wreck. Now, if any of you who grew up here, you know we all go to car wrecks. We all go to car wrecks. Now, Mr. Meadows has chosen not to participate in our communities in that regard. He has secluded himself.
Time. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you another minute, and I'm going to give you another minute.
Give us 5, if you will.
I don't have time, but I'll give you 1 each.
Well, I mean, if we're going to get down to personal attacks, I'm not going to go there. You know, I think for him to challenge whether I've been active in my community or not is not fair, and it's not right. And if we want to start bringing in a list of people that we've been involved with, we can do that, as I'm sure you can over in Cherokee County as well. But here's the thing: mountain values are all about speaking the truth. That's a mountain value. And you know, I've got friends that are Tallies and Woods and Potts that have been around here for generations. That quite frankly, they don't have to tell me that. Now, if you have to be born here to have mountain values, I've got 2 children that were born here, so I can ask them about the mountain values. But here's the other part of that: is I don't have to worry about getting 3 votes to figure out if God is someone that we need to acknowledge. That's a mountain value as well, and I'm proud that our party didn't have to argue over that particular thing.
To my point, Russ, my comments aren't an indication of whether he is a good man or not. It's about perspective. It's about the things that you have viewed and participated in and understand. Now, we can all learn to speak a second language. I'm still working on English as my first. You can become fluent in it, but odds are you don't speak it as well as the person whose native language that was. And what I'm telling you is, my campaigns have been about going into garages It's about going into places where the people feel bad for shaking your hand and start trying to clean their hands off because they're working. And I don't let them. It's about the people I grew up with. It's people who know the difference between an exhaust and a belly pan on a track hoe. It's about guys that have gone out and understand the day-to-day struggles that we've gone through for generations. This recession is not the first hard times we've had here. That's my point.
Now, this is a two-part question. We'll hit you with the first part, then let you answer that, then hit you with the second part. After that, we'll give you the opportunity for rebuttal for the first and second part, okay? First part of this question. This region has long struggled to balance protecting its environment and promoting industrial and real estate development. Provide us with one example from our region where you believe we place too much emphasis on environmental protection at the expense of economic development. Mr. Rogers.
Corridor K is a great example of that. That's the Appalachian Regional Commission highway system that was supposed to connect Asheville to Chattanooga. It's been ongoing for decades. That has made it to the doorstep right inside my county, and it has stopped. We can build roads in an environmentally sensitive way that allows us to have progress and growth and opportunity, and at the same time protects the environment. And I have been very frustrated with some folks' ability, organized ability, to continue to prolong or delay a project that is essential to Western North Carolina. Congress needs that Western North Carolina, the Appalachian region as a whole, if it didn't get the basic infrastructure it needed, would never really experience the economic prosperity that many other regions got. So that project, which is very dear to me, it's in my hometown, is not just about Robbinsville, but it will help the entire region.
Hayden and I agree on Corridor K. I mean, he's on that group. I actually went over there to show support for that particular section of the road that quite frankly, we've been studying for years and years and years, and now we've embarked on another 2-year study to see if we should build it. But here's the other thing is when we start to allow the environmental concerns to be so great that they affect us economically in an adverse way, we see that over and over. Corridor K is one of those. We also can see that right here in Jackson County. They put in place a slope ordinance that literally you cannot figure out without an engineer to figure out how steep the slope is, because it's not just something that says, okay, this is 15% or this is 30% or whatever it is. You've got to have an engineer with this unbelievable formula to figure it out. And their whole goal is to try to make sure that the land that you have doesn't get built on. Now, when we get to such a point where we're saying that everything is off limits, we've gone too far. And so I think those are two examples.
This is the second part of that question. Name an example where we place too much emphasis on economic development at the expense of the environment.
As someone who believes clean air and clean water are a birthright, I think everybody in here in this room can agree with that. None of us aspire to damage our environment. I think the balance that we strike with preserving our environmental assets, which are an asset to this community, and our economic needs, is one that's rooted in a balanced and common sense approach to that. Overdevelopment or unsustainable development or bad practices is a problem, whether that's done at an individual level or at a macro level. I go back to the fact we have the ability to not do that. We have the ability to develop sustainably. We do it cleaner than anybody in the world in most cases. And that's what I believe we should do moving forward.
And so the question was, is specific example where development is perhaps hurt us environmentally.
That's correct.
Here in Jackson County, there's one particular development out of Big Ridge Road. If you go out Big Ridge Road, what they've done is they had a developer that came in that didn't adhere to some of the soil erosion provisions that were there. Cut in roads to the extent left large open banks that were there, and so we got a lot of siltation and so forth down in down in the creeks that are trout creeks, and so as we see that, that's one area that we got. Now here's the interesting thing though, we've got laws on the books right now that will stop that kind of thing, and so those kinds of enforcements are good. But as we start to see, what happens is that we will allow some development to take place on a phase-by-phase basis and sidestep some of those environmental regulations. And so we need to look at that in terms of development as a whole, and I believe we can address that on a state level.
Rebut?
Again, I mean, I think it's about balance. I mean, specific issues, Telco in Cherokee County, where I live now, an OHV park that ended up in violation of the Clean Water Act and forced the Forest Service to go in and remediate and change activities there. Common sense takes us a long way in life, whether that's in environmental protection or whether that's in how we treat our neighbors and how we choose to live our lives. And I don't know that you need thousands of pages of regulations to dictate that. But I do believe that it is critical that we protect those very basic and essential resources that we have here. I serve on the North Carolina Wildlife Commission. One of the things we do on that commission is deal with the management of our public lands and conservation in order to ensure not only access for sportsmen, but access for all of us, and the preservation of those things for clean air and clean water.
Well, as we look at it, none of us are against clean air or clean water, but here's the thing, is when we talk about regulations are part of our problem because it allows administrative agencies to get out of control. And we've seen that. You know, the Federal Registry has grown from some 40,000 pages in the 1980s to over 89,000 pages now with 11,000 more pages of regulation. Kind of thing, it puts a stranglehold on everybody. You can take a business here in Jackson County that had emissions coming out, and they got people that came in and said, you know, what we need to do is we need to clean up your emissions because you've got too many parts per million of arsenic coming out of the smokestack. So they hired $100,000 in studies, and they came in and they said, you know, we're going to clean this up. And they said, you know what, there's not the technology to actually clean it up. And you know what we found out? Is the ambient air was 10 parts per billion, the same that was coming out of the smokestack. So they were trying to make it cleaner than the ambient air. That's the kind of regulation we need to do away with.
Do you feel that Congress should have a say in whether EPA, or do you have an opinion as to whether you believe EPA should be streamlined, or would you simply get rid of it and leave it up to the states?
Well, I mean, EPA is set, EPA is set up by the federal government, and it's gotten way out of control. And it threatens to shut down every single business that does anything that puts it into the air. Case in point, we look at Haywood County. They burn coal under the CO2 emission standard that has just been regulated. What we've got an issue there is because ultimately that if it's not changed by the federal government, I see we're already at
Go to them.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. What we've got is a CO2 emission that threatens to put them out of business because they won't be able to use coal unless we change it. We've allowed the EPA to become a dictator from an agency standpoint. We need to wane that and bring it back. We also need to make sure that what we do is not allow these unelected bureaucrats to act like they're Congress. It's time that Congress does their job, puts a limit, defines what a wetland is, and it's time that we do that and do it now.
Yes.
I don't think there's any question that the EPA is overextended, burdensome, and complicated, and inflexible. We have made a mistake in many of the things that we do from a regulatory side, and we have taken away the ability of the folks on the ground to make determinations and to use judgment and common sense when they look at applicable laws. I think we need to return to that. I think we have an extremely burdensome regulatory process that is confusing for all of us to abide, and it's confusing for those who try to enforce that. That said, there are things we must ensure that don't happen. We want to ensure for those that have been here a long time, even longer than me, you don't want the Tuckasegee River running black again. We don't want to go there. But at the same time, we don't want Evergreen being shut down because there's 2 parts, too many per million of a colorant that is undetectable by the eye and undetectable without scientific study. There's a balance to be had there, and that's what we should be looking for.
Believe it or not, time is up. We're going to have time for 2-minute closing statements. Mr. Meadows, you are first.
Well, thank you so much for your attention tonight. I certainly appreciate you coming out. I think Hayden would agree with me. Outside of our bar, this is the largest crowd that we've had the opportunity to be in front of, and I just appreciate the opportunity. More importantly than that, I wanted to thank my wife, Debbie, who is here tonight. She's been campaigning with me for well over a year, and it gets tough on families, as I know it does on you, Donna, and I just want to thank you for being so supportive. I also want to say that, I'm a small business guy, a conservative Christian businessman that believes that we need to protect life, we need to protect liberty, and we need to have less government. And when we talk about life, we need to make sure that we protect the unborn, and that's what I stand for. We need to make sure that marriage is between one man and one woman. We need to make sure that also that we protect our Constitution and the freedoms that it guarantees. We need to stand by our veterans and our commitment to our veterans. It's not the America that I know that we ask them to go serve and then they come back and we change the deal. It's time that we stand up for that. We also need to look at our Second Amendment rights and our religious liberties that are being trampled on every single day by this administration. Because you know what? We have a First Amendment right to the freedom of religion, and it's time that we stand up and that we're accounted for. And I promise you that I will do that. And the last thing is when we look at less government. We mentioned a little bit of the spending and some of the things that are there. But we've got a 4-point plan that talks about limiting the role of government, not doing away with it because it has a role. But we've got to limit the regulations and allow businesses to get going again. I'm committed to you. I ask for your support. I ask for your vote. And Lord willing, we'll change this nation and reclaim it. Thank you. God bless.
Again, I want to thank all of you for coming. And I want to thank you for participating in the process. Whether you agree with me, disagree, or agree with Mark, disagree, it is not the relevant point. The fact is, we all need to be more engaged than we are. We need to be more participative in the system, and we need to have a voice and vote. That's what led me to do this. See, I was very fortunate. And I had a chance to serve the people, as I told you before. And the value of good public service should not be lost on any of you in this room. Regardless of who wins this election, it's something that you, as constituents, deserve. Now, I made the decision. I knew this was going to be a tough race for me. I knew that the district had changed. I knew a lot of factors were not going to be working in my favor. But I knew this was a fight worth having. I knew this was a discussion worth having. Because, see, I believe the people of Western North Carolina deserve no less. Now, when you embark on something like this, you really take a good look at yourself. and you really analyze and you think about these things and you question. And one thing that I decided when I was going to do this was, I'm running this race as me. Now, it would have been easy for me to flank left in a primary and flank back to the middle or to the right in a general. I chose not to do any of that because I think it's important that you know who I am. I think it's important that you know what makes me tick and what my opinions are on things. And I've held true to that. I'm the same fellow in the mirror as I am right here. My wife can attest to that. But I work hard. And I believe in the value of investing in people. And I believe that by working together, both at home and in Congress, America's got brighter days ahead. And I don't think either party has all the solutions. But both parties will be the problem if we don't start working together and putting the needs of America ahead of our party affiliations and our individual ideologies. I thank y'all again very much for being here. I ask for your support. Even all those metal stickers, I ask you to reconsider. I've got some smaller stickers out there. You might want to take.
Mr. Meadows, if you want 20 extra seconds, you could.